This is BBC World News. I'm James Menendez. Coming up in just a minute, World Have Your Say. But first, let's take a look at the latest headlines this hour. Myanmar's opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi has used a meeting with Barack Obama to condemn laws which stop her running for the presidency of her country. She said the rules were unfair and undemocratic. President Putin says the sanctions imposed on Russia by the G20 countries are illegal and harmful. He was speaking ahead of his arrival at the G20 summit in Australia. The sanctions were imposed over Russia's alleged backing of separatist groups in Ukraine. But Mr. Putin says he will not discuss the measures at this weekend's gathering because it would be pointless. Israel says it's eased the restrictions on people who want to attend the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. A ban on men aged under 50 had been imposed following clashes between Palestinians and Israelis. Palestinian groups have been opposed to a campaign calling for Jewish worshippers to be given new rights to pray at the site. And Indian police have arrested the director of a drugs factory and his son in the central state of Chhattisgarh as part of an investigation into the deaths of 15 women at 2 state-run sterilisation camps. It's alleged that tainted drugs may have caused the deaths. The men have been held on suspicion of destroying evidence. I will be back in an hour with a full bulletin of world news. First, though, over to Chloe with World Have Your Say.
Thanks, James, and welcome to the programme. Well, it's been the story that's captured imaginations all this week. The Philae comet, which has landed. Now, after the initial jubilation, scientists are now racing to get as much information from the lander before its battery runs out in just a matter of hours. The drilling to gather samples has begun, and now the Rosetta team says it will try and move it later on today, hopefully into the sun. It's a risky decision, but one which scientists do hope could pay off. Well, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to connect to Mission Control, as well as speak to space scientists and also to teachers to explain how this mission has inspired a generation. Now, if you have questions for any of our guests throughout the next 30 minutes, all of the key contact details will be on screen throughout. Lots to talk about, so let's get started.
I experienced. This is chaos. People are going to want to know. Let's just say something.
Good to have you with us. Now, a little bit later on, we're going to bring you a film we made in Lagos about how the world views Nigeria. From corruption to scams to creativity, do you know the real Nigeria? And as we speak, I'm getting this snap coming in from northeastern Nigeria saying that Boko Haram militants have seized the town of Chibok. You'll remember, of course, that Chibok was where more than 200 schoolgirls were abducted earlier this year, back in April. The reports say that local people are fleeing and the militants have targeted Chibok a number of times since those abductions. Of course, as we get more information on that, we'll bring it to you here on World Have Your Say. But let's turn our attention to the Philae comet landing. We've got lots to talk about. I'll introduce you to our guests in the next few minutes. But first of all, we've been sent this video from the United States. Let's have a look.
Hello, my name is Michael Satcher. I live in Hernando, Mississippi. Over the course of my lifetime, I've witnessed numerous landmarks in space exploration. A few have been tragic, such as the Space Shuttle Challenger and Space Shuttle Columbia accidents, and some have been quite remarkable, the landing of a rover on Mars and the International Space Station. However, what I witnessed yesterday was by far one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. The precision and skill it took to land the Philae lander on an orbiting comet is absolutely amazing. I've always fascinated to witness historic events in real time, and as a teacher, I try to stress the importance of those events to my students. So to the Rosetta team, I say great job and good luck with the rest of this mission.
Well, that's Michael's view from the US. Let me introduce you to our guests who join us now to speak about this. Emily Rice is an astrophysics professor from the College of Staten Island in the US. Emily Lakdawalla is a planetary scientist and a writer and joins us from Darmstadt in Germany. But first of all, let's speak to Monica Grady, who's a space scientist, professor of planetary and space sciences at the Open University, and has quite frankly worked on this mission from the word go, and joins us now from the UK. Monica, lots of people will have seen you earlier in the week jumping around Wednesday. No, don't be embarrassed. It was lovely. You were absolutely delighted on Wednesday when you were at Mission Control and saw what happened.
Yeah.
You've had a couple of days to kind of take it all in. How are you feeling now?
Well, you know, a tweet I got from one of my nieces, world's most embarrassing auntie or what? Sort of more or less sums it up, I think. Yeah, I mean, it was unbridled joy on Wednesday because just the waiting, you know, you were screwed up like a sort of wound up elastic band, and, you know, it was all just let go, absolutely all just in that outpouring. And it wasn't just me, I just happened to be, you know, next to the television camera. You know, there could have been loads of people that were pictured doing that, because we were all jumping up and down, and it was absolutely fantastic. It took about 15 minutes before we managed to realize that actually things weren't perfect, but you know, by that time people were so happy that the landing had actually happened, that it hadn't, you know, overshot or anything like that, that they were just really glad.
And Monica, before I introduce you to Emily and Emily, just explain for people watching around the world. I said in the introduction that the drilling has begun. This is a risky manoeuvre and there are concerns about it, but as I said, the battery life is getting rather flat. There's concerns that it won't last much longer because the sun isn't able to recharge those solar panels. So explain what this drilling is and what it would do if it was a success.
Right, well, the drill is at the bottom of Philae, and if Philae was sitting properly, the drill would have gone vertically down straight into the comet. And then the idea was material was sort of passed up through the inside of the drill and put into a little carousel. And that carousel was feeding ovens on two instruments, the Kozak instrument and the Ptolemy instrument. Both those instruments were then going to measure the isotopic composition, or the composition of the water and the carbon dioxide in the dust and in the ice. The problem is, we know the drill has started drilling. We know it's gone down about 20-25 centimeters. We don't know what's happening now, though, because Rosetta has gone below the horizon and the radio link is broken. We won't know for another few hours what has actually happened.
Let's bring in Emily Lakdawalla, who's a planetary scientist and writer. She's in Darmstadt in Germany. We can see there at the control centre of all of this. Just explain what it's been like to be there over the last couple of days.
It's been absolutely elating, ecstatic. It's been quite an adventure because there's been so much confusion about what precisely happened with the lander bouncing for 2 hours and then coming into a spot. We don't know where it is, but we do know that it's acquiring all kinds of scientific data. And to see the expressions of joy, just like Monica's, and I want to compliment you, Monica, on expressing your joy, because you show that scientists are passionate people who really care about what they do. So thank you for that. But also just I think the other major emotion here is relief. Thank God it worked. And now we're beginning to get the data back. And now we have to be patient for the science that's going to come out of it. It'll take quite some time to get the science done. So right now it's just joy and relief and exhaustion, I also have to say.
Well, just explain to us what's going to happen over the next few hours. I don't know if Monica wants to do that, Emily wants to do that, but it's high risk what's going to happen. Potentially, we could see the lander disappearing off, if you like, if it loses contact with the comet. So who wants to explain what's going to happen?
Well, I can take that. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I'll say a little bit, but then Emily Lakdawalla can probably fill us in better, because, you know, she's in direct contact with the people at the control. But one of the concerns is that as the drill drills down, the momentum in parts of the comet, it might push, you know, it might be sufficient to actually push Philae over, if not actually off the comet. And so that's why things are going very, very slowly. And that's why the drill wasn't deployed until more or less everything else that could be done in terms of the science had been done. And so now we'll get bonus science. So I'll hand over to Emily Lakdawalla now to carry on.
Sure, yeah. Stefan Ulamets, who's the mission manager, said today that they'd gotten back about 80% of the science data that they could have expected from the first science sequence. And yes, it's the last thing before drilling. But the other thing that's really coming down to the wire now is power, because all evidence indicates that the lander eventually arrived in a hole. And 2 of the 3 solar panels on the lander are not actually receiving any solar illumination during the day. The last one is only getting 1.5 hours out of each 12-hour day on the comet, and that is just not enough to recharge the batteries. So there had been hopes for a longer extended landed mission after the battery power, the main battery power had run out. But now we really are getting down to the very last of the battery power that the lander brought with it. In fact, there is a little bit of doubt as to whether we will get back in touch with the lander tonight to find out what happened with the drilling. But models indicate that they should have enough power for 1 more communications pass. If we are luckier than we have any right to be, then we'll have yet 1 more communications pass tomorrow morning. But right now, we're just all on tenterhooks, hoping that at about 9 o'clock local time this evening, or about 10 o'clock, that we'll actually have some signals again from the lander. And in all likelihood, if we do, it's the last contact with Philae. Until the comet gets closer to the sun, then there's some small chance that there could be just enough power returning to the solar panels that it might potentially recharge the battery.
Let's bring in Emily Rice, who's an astrophysics professor from College of Staten Island. I know you watched this and you felt all the emotions, I think, that Monica probably demonstrated for us on screen. Was it how you expected it to look? Because there's been lots of discussion, hasn't there, about the actual visual images that have come back from the comet. What were you expecting?
Oh, geez. I don't know what I was expecting. It was hard to know what to expect. I was watching the live feed at home in my living room, and I definitely jumped up and down and screamed, although, you know, the world wasn't watching me, so that was kind of lucky.
How significant?
I was watching the live feed and... Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
I was watching the live feed and it was muted and the sound was coming from somewhere else for a little while, and I was really wishing that I could have read lips, because people were shrugging and, you know, people were looking a little bit worried, honestly. And then when the relief came over their faces, it was just amazing to know that this had succeeded. This is decades of work for many, many people, and I'm so proud of them.
Let's bring in Dr. Matthew Genge, who's a senior lecturer in Earth and Planetary Science at Imperial College in London. Just explain for people, this mission, it took 10 years. Lots of people will find it very difficult to get their head around why it takes so long to get there. I know it's an incredibly long way, but 10 years, just explain that to us.
Well, it also took the long route round. It had to, because you need to get the speed of the spacecraft up to catch a comet, because the comets have very strange orbits. Unlike the planets that go around in circles, comets have elongate orbits, they head towards the sun, and they move a lot faster. So you really need to take these slingshots around planets in order to speed the spacecraft up, so you don't have to use loads of fuel, and hence 10 years to get there.
And I mean, an obvious question, but it's got 10-year-old technology on board. Is that significant? Is it kind of out-of-date technology? Because if you look at the technology, how much it's come on, you know, I'm holding a tablet here on the television. I wouldn't have been doing that 10 years ago. Is that significant?
Well, yes, of course, we could get better analyses if we could grab some material off of the comet, fly all the way back to Earth, get it back down to the ground to a modern laboratory and analyze it there, and do all of that without changing the material. But that would be considerably more difficult than actually what we're doing right now. So this is the best we can do at the moment. You know, missions take a long time. It takes a long time to build the equipment. It's brand new. It's top of the range when it flies, and we really can't do anything about the fact that it will become slightly out of date.
Emily Rice, you were nodding.
Yeah, it's something that we're going to have to live with. Our technology is always going to be old because it takes so long to get to these places. And even you know, before something goes up on a rocket and is launched into space, it has to be tested, it has to be calibrated and things like that. And so the technology is always going to lag behind a little bit. And the faster we develop the technology, the more behind it's going to be. I was thinking about where I was when Rosetta was launched 10 years ago, and I had just started grad school, and I think I had just gotten my first cell phone, to give you an idea of what the technology was like 10 years ago.
Emily, thank you. Thank you also to Dr. Genge and to Monica. We're going to carry on talking about this in the next few minutes. We're going to be joined by a man who designed the wheel, part of the lander on that comet. So do stay with us here on World Have Your Say.
No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something.
Close to 1 million people murdered in the genocide, including members of my family. The population is young and growing rapidly. Kigali is my city.
Once Sweden's Viking heartland, today one of Europe's most sophisticated cities.
It's a part of the lifestyle here to look good and to dress nice.
Stockholm is my city.
For the whole of my life, all this was hidden from the world. But now, Rangoon has been uncovered. Rangoon is
No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something.
Welcome back to World Have Your Say. We're talking about the Philae lander, and we're joined by lots of guests to discuss the significance of this space exploration. We're still joined by Dr. Matthew Genge and Monica Grady, but also joining us now is Professor Herman Stein, who's from the Department of Electrical Engineering at the University of Stellenbosch, and he designed part of the lander. Explain to us, Professor Stein, your role in all of this.
Yes, about 14 years ago, I was working in England at the University of Surrey, more specifically at Surrey Satellite Technology. And we were approached by the German Space Agency, by DLR, to design the momentum wheel for the lander. They had an initial lander from a German company, but that couldn't meet the specifications that they were looking for, very low power and a certain angular momentum to give you the gyroscopic stiffness for the lander. As you know, it took about 7 hours after the lander was released from the Rosetta satellite to then to take a trajectory down to the comet. And that movement was quite slow, but in the 7-hour period, the lander had to stay upright so that it could land on the comet on its legs. And this was basically the flywheel or momentum wheel that we designed at Surrey Satellite Technology. I was the project leader of that project to design the momentum wheel.
And what does it feel like 10 years on, or 14 years on from when you started working on it, to see your role in such a successful mission?
I cannot really describe that. I think it was relief once the lander was on the comet that the wheel didn't cause any problems, because if the wheel wasn't there, the landing definitely wouldn't have taken place. Also, the trajectory to control the lander down to the comet was also then in jeopardy. But it seems the wheel worked fine. And I think the words of Stefan Ulemek right at the end after landing, when he said the flywheel is now spinning down, that was sort of the cherry on the cake. I mean, I was ecstatic.
I want to pull up a video now which we've been sent from South Korea to get your reaction. Let's have a look.
Hello, how are you? My name is Anton, and I'm a Canadian teacher working in South Korea teaching math. And I am so excited. I've been watching the news. I've been actually following the landing up to the second. And I was on the live stream at the moment the landing occurred. The thing is, it was actually 3 a.m. here, and I had to work the day after. Came to work. I was super tired. It was super grumpy, but so excited. And I tried to basically express that excitement to my students. And so what I've decided to do is the whole week next week, I'm going to change my curriculum and essentially turn my classroom into the space exploration. I'm going to use space video games, space videos. I'm going to talk about the Rosetta mission. And I'm going to put all of that into my geometry class, into my grade 11 class, and basically have them, I'm going to try to infect them with my space love.
And that's Anton, who's a teacher. We're joined now by another teacher, Bettina Hansen, who's a physics and chemistry teacher in Denmark. I know you teach teenagers, Bettina. How have they responded to all the discoveries this week and the coverage around the world?
Well, first of all, they have been very exciting about all this. They have been very excited about the significance in all this Rosetta mission. And today they have been, I don't know, not scared, but they came to me today and said, oh no, the Philae lander didn't end up as good as it was supposed to. And I had to tell them that it was actually a very, very important thing that actually did happen, even though it unfortunately didn't land as it was supposed to. And I'm always teaching them in significant events in space. Recently we had the Ison comet who passed the sun. Unfortunately it broke up, but they're very excited about all these things that actually is happening out in space.
Well, children and young people are always engaged by space, aren't they? Because they have these endless imaginations that seem to disappear the older we get. But how important is it for projects like this to inspire the next generation?
It's very important because we hope that it's going to explain how life developed on Earth, and suddenly the question form in their heads that, well, if there is the building blocks for life on these comets, what is going to happen if one of those building blocks, like comets, actually hit the Earth as it did? And I also speak to them about the Sentinel mission, who they are hoping to get the funds for. So we might can what is it called? Now I'm lost it.
I get the idea of what you're saying about how important it is to inspire the next generation. I want to bring in Emily Rice, because I wonder, what was it that hooked you into space and a passion for it?
Geez, I was actually not interested. Well, not to say that I wasn't interested, but I wasn't one of those kids that was like looking through a telescope at a very young age or anything like that. I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do even until I started college. I was always interested in science. I was always interested in math, but I didn't have people around me that had jobs in it really, other than teachers and things like that. But when I started college was when I first realized that people were actively doing research in these things. I actually had an introductory astronomy class that was scheduled for 50 minutes, and we never left when the class was supposed to end. Everyone in the class just stayed afterwards, and the professor would keep talking for as long as we would sit there. And I said, okay, what do I have to do to learn more about this? And then after college, I said, okay, what do I have to do to contribute to this? And I went to grad school.
I want to bring in Dr. Matthew Genge, who is still with us. Apologies, Emily, sorry for interrupting you. There's a slight delay on the line. But Dr. Matthew Genge, I wonder, one point that keeps being brought up when we've been learning about the Philae landing is about the idea that it could make us understand why there is water on Earth. And one question that keeps coming to mind is, how does that work? Explain to us how the comet and water on Earth kind of links together, if you would.
Sure, yeah. Well, if you imagine in the early solar system, our planet forming, it had a very hot birth. So we think the inner part of our solar system was very hot, and we think there probably wasn't much water on the Earth after it got to its full size. And because we do have oceans, we need to add that water from somewhere. And we see evidence when we look at the surface of the moon that the moon and the Earth were bombarded by many impactors towards the end of their formation. And this is known as the late bombardment, and we think that perhaps this was comets hitting the moon and the Earth. And comets, of course, are largely water ice. They contain lots of water ice, and so they could have delivered the Earth's oceans. So the objective of one of the objectives of the mission is to look at the water on the comet, to analyse that water and say, does it have the same composition as water on Earth? And if that's the case, then it's much more likely that comets are responsible for making our planet blue.
Presumably, though, the sheer volume of information which is being fed back at the moment is going to take months to decipher and come to those kind of conclusions.
Yeah, I'm certain it will do. And actually, Monica knows a lot more about these analyses than I do. But I'm assuming when the data comes in, they're also going to be doing work back on Earth at the Open University in their laboratory. They've got an identical instrument to make absolutely sure that those numbers, those compositions are exactly right.
I want to bring in Tal very quickly. Tal Imbar from the Fisher Institute for Air and Space Strategic Studies in Israel. We don't have much time, Tal, but briefly, if you would, what sort of reaction has there been in Israel?
Oh, it was excitement all over, on Facebook, national media, TV, newspapers, and so on. A lot of attention, not only from professionals like colleagues. One of them, by the way, was on the team that envisioned Rosetta almost a quarter of a century ago, but the general reaction was very good, and a lot of attention was given to this event.
Tal, I am so sorry that I've got to jump in, but thank you so much. Do stay with us on World Have Your Say. We're going to be heading to Nigeria to look at the country's image.
Let's just say something.
Hello there. If you're in southern France, northern parts of Italy, it's time to cover your ears and your eyes again. More flooding could be on its way. This area cloud here, spinning its way across Western Europe at the moment, is set to bring more intense rain and risk of flooding. Now, just notice through the night, southern France, how the bright colours appear in the chart, sliding away into northwestern parts of Italy. Relentless rain, strong and gusty winds, and that risk of flooding will start to increase once more. We start with eastern areas with a bit of patchy frost here and there, a bit of a breeze though blowing across northern parts of Europe into Scandinavia. That will exacerbate the chill. But around Alpine regions, heavy snow through the day. The rain eases away from southern France but really takes hold across northern and western parts of Italy, and the problems will start to lift once again. Now, across in Iberia for Saturday, better conditions, southern Portugal, southern Spain compared with Friday, but further north, the showers pack their way in. 4 or 5 metre waves out across western parts of Portugal, strong and gusty winds, Bay of Biscay, lots of showers packing in here. Snow, as I said, quite extensive across the southern Alps. We'd like to see some rain spread its way across the Low Countries into western Germany. A few showers further north, temperatures creeping up, although only a few degrees above freezing, northern Sweden and Finland. Quick look across northwest Europe for Sunday and Monday. Rome, storms will continue. Paris, a few showers as well. London should stay by and large dry, but a bit of rain can't be ruled out at times. Quick look across Africa. Many northern areas will be dry, but we'll see some rain just clip across parts of Algeria. For South Africa, inland areas could see a drop in temperature thanks to southerly winds of around 7 to 8 degrees on Friday's values.
As world leaders descend on Brisbane for a crucial G20 summit, BBC World News is here too.
What else can presidents and prime ministers do here once the talking stops? The travel show finds out as part of Australia Direct.
From the big outdoors to the big cities, Click looks at how the latest technology is transforming this vast nation.
I'm back home in Sydney for Working Lives, meeting local workers who, despite their different backgrounds, all share the Aussie ambition.
Extra Time is back with a special week of interviews with some of the country's biggest names in sport for Australia Direct.
And I'll be at the G20 Summit in Brisbane, discussing the big issues in a Talking Business special.
There's even more on air and online. For all the details, go to bbc.com/Australia Direct. Australia Direct on BBC World News.
Get breaking news, reports and analysis from a source you can trust on social media. We are the most shared international news brand on Twitter and have over 20 million Facebook page likes worldwide. Subscribe, follow, like. BBC, the leader in global breaking news.